Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open what is essentially the official instruction manual for the United States, the Civics test.
So, have you ever stopped to wonder what actually holds a country like the United States together? I mean, you're talking about over 330 million people from literally every background imaginable. What's the common thread there?
Well, believe it or not, there's kind of an official user manual. It's the Civics test, a required exam for anyone who wants to become a U.S. citizen, and it's built to cover the absolute must-know essentials of American government and history.
So, what better way to get to the core of the country's programming than by looking at its own answer key? We're going to use this test as our guide, our blueprint, to explore the foundational story of the United States. You know, every nation starts with an idea, and for the United States, that big idea was independence, which back in the 18th century was a totally radical thought. But, okay, here's the real trick. How do you actually turn a powerful idea like that into a real functioning country?
The answer really comes down to two key documents. Think of the Declaration of Independence as the why. It's the passionate, philosophical argument for why they needed to break away. But the Constitution, that came later. That's the how, the practical, super detailed manual for actually building and running the whole thing. This line right here, from the Declaration, written by Thomas Jefferson back in 1776, it pretty much became the nation's mission statement. And what's so revolutionary about it is the idea that these rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they don't come from a king or a government. They're just yours because you're human. And then the Constitution kicks off with maybe the three most important words in American government. We, the people. I mean, this is everything. It completely flips the old model on its head. Power doesn't flow down from a ruler. No, it flows up from the citizens. That is the core idea of self-government. Okay, but having the people in charge creates a brand new problem, right? How do you build a government that's powerful enough to actually get things done, but not so powerful that it stomps all over the people's rights? The founders were obsessed with this question, just terrified of creating the very thing they fought against. So, what was their solution? They came up with a pretty brilliant solution. They split the power into pieces. The entire federal government was divided into three branches, each totally equal. Each branch has its own job, but more importantly, each one has the power to limit, or check, the power of the other two. This is that famous system of checks and balances you hear about. And here's the basic breakdown of that three-part system. First, you have Congress, the legislative branch. Their job is to make the laws. Then you've got the president, who leads the executive branch, and their job is to enforce the laws. And finally, you have the courts, the judicial branch, and they interpret the laws to make sure they're being applied fairly and follow the Constitution. And get this idea of splitting power exists even inside of Congress. You've got the House of Representatives with these really short 2-year terms, so they're designed to always be in touch with what the public wants right now. But then you have the Senate with their longer 6-year terms. They're meant to be a stabilizing force, to cool things down and take a longer view. It's a built-in tension, right, between being responsive and being steady.
Now, at the head of that executive branch is the president. This isn't a king, not by a long shot, but the role comes with some serious power. We're talking about being commander-in-chief of the entire military, appointing judges who can serve for life, and holding the ultimate check on Congress by signing or vetoing new laws.
And finally, at the very, very top of the judicial branch, you have the Supreme Court. Just 9 justices. They are the ultimate interpreters of the law. When they make a decision on what the Constitution means, that's it. It's final. But here is a fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty controversial detail about how this court works. These justices, they aren't elected. They're appointed, and they serve for life. So you have to ask, in a democracy that's all about the will of the people, why would you give 9 people that much power for that long? Well, the logic behind these lifetime appointments is basically to create a shield. By taking away the need to ever run for re-election, the justices are supposed to be protected from the pressures of politics and whatever the popular opinion of the day is. In theory, their only job is to rule based on the law and the Constitution, no matter how unpopular that decision might be.
Okay, but this whole government blueprint, it's only half the story. The most important piece of the entire system is the people, us. The whole structure is designed to run on the power and, just as importantly, the participation of its citizens.
What's so smart is that the founders knew they weren't perfect. They knew they couldn't predict the future, so they actually designed the Constitution to be changed. It is not set in stone. Through a formal process called amendments, the document can be updated to reflect the values of new generations. And so far, that's happened 27 times. Now, the most famous of all these amendments are the first 10. We know them as the Bill of Rights. They were added almost immediately because a lot of people felt the original Constitution didn't do enough to protect individual liberties. This is where we get the clear written down guarantees of our core freedoms, like freedom of speech, religion, and the right to assemble. But here's the thing. Having these rights isn't a passive sport. It comes with responsibilities. The whole system relies on citizens actually participating. And that means a lot more than just voting, though that is absolutely crucial. It's about running for office yourself, helping out with a campaign you believe in, or even just calling your local representative to make your voice heard. Of course, this blueprint wasn't just some academic exercise. It was forged and hammered into shape in the real world. The nation's history has been this constant struggle to live up to its own founding ideals, a story really shaped by conflict and massive change. The civics test really points to these defining moments that put the nation's principles to the test. You have the revolution to even create the country, the Civil War, which nearly tore it apart, fought over the original sin of slavery, the World Wars, which forced it onto the global stage, and the Civil Rights Movement, which was a powerful, decades-long fight to make that promise of equality real for every single citizen. And these incredible trials produced some incredible leaders. George Washington, the general who somehow won the war for independence, and then, as the first president, had the impossible job of guiding this fragile new nation through its infancy. Yeah, he's called the father of our country for a very good reason. And then you have Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president. He had to steer the country through its absolute darkest hour, the Civil War. His leadership didn't just save the Union. Through the Emancipation Proclamation, he started the long, painful process of ending slavery, which fundamentally remade the nation itself. So, when you look at it all, the civics test shows us that the American story isn't some finished product you read about in a book. It's an ongoing construction project, with the Constitution serving as the master blueprint. And that leaves us with one last really important question. If that's the blueprint, then we, the people, are the architects. And we're the ones responsible for whatever gets built next.